Now, when we see the LGBT marriages, there's just so much love and devotion. Is it because that they have to work so hard to get to the altar?
Well, it's interesting. If you've been denied the right for anything, whatever it is, if you're a kid and you're not allowed to drive, if you're, a kid and you're not allowed to have a drink in a bar, whatever it is, when you get to finally do it, it means a lot. But here's a situation where a lot of people have been in 20, 30-year relationships and they were never able to benefit from one another's health insurance, let's say. And now finally they're given the right in certain states to marry. Of course, this is the most extraordinary experience. And I went to my cousin's wedding, and it was 1972, I think, and it was really interesting. She didn't invite her parents, and her wife didn't invite her parents. And I think one of her brothers, there are two brothers, one of her brothers was there, one was not. And Phyllis, who married Peggy, Phyllis's brother was there, and I was there. And so it was, it was really interesting to see how much pain there was associated with this. And, here we are, that was 1972 or 3, and here we are in 2015. And those of you who are watching the show on YouTube and you're in other parts of the world, this may be what you're going through. Or the fact that you could never marry in your own country. So yeah, when you struggle for something so long, it really takes on a great meaning and value to you.
Even a traditional marriage, Susan, there's a lot of judgments as well. So
That's right.
regardless of
That's
your
right.
opinion, if you see people that love one another, I hope that you can get in touch with your heart and be accepting and loving towards them.
Right, because it's the habit of judging which is the problem. So whether someone's judging a couple with one male and one female, and somebody's a different race, or somebody has a component, a racial component, or somebody's a different religion, or somebody comes from another country, the fact that those people are judging is what Gigi's show is all about, that it's time to just step away from the judging. And so this is just another flavor of judgment that is so painful for you and me to pay attention to, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awful.
So hopefully somebody out there is getting a different picture of this, a different point of view, and being more supportive. Now, how about, Susan, would you be able to talk now, of course you would, about the spiritual aspect of relationships, including the LGBT community?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Now, if you've watched the show before, then you may have heard me say that in a relationship between opposites, you may find a lot of chemistry with the opposites, but you're going to have to really learn how to understand your partner and get along with your partner. Now, if you're both women, you don't have those problems, by and large. But you're going to have the problems out in the world. And one thing my cousin used to say to me is that, because neither of them was a man, and because in their lesbian friends, it's two women all the time, nobody has testosterone. So it's challenging, and women have a little testosterone, but it's really challenging. You don't get somebody who's really ready to step out. You don't have somebody who's really aggressive. You may not have somebody who's reaching out to have more sex. So there are adjustments that have to be made. When you're talking about two gay men, the opposite may be true because there's two men with testosterone. So there may be a lot of the challenges that women would experience with a male partner. Now you've got two male partners. And again, it's about noticing the difference between having similar hormones or having different hormones. Now, bisexuality, that's a whole other issue because it depends. Are you being bisexual with someone who's got the same kind of body you have that minute, or a partner who's got the different genetics? So it all matters on whether your needs are similar or different, and to what level you have the skill to motivate and inspire this other person to cooperate. Because you know what I say, in a choice between coercion, which means forcing somebody, or capitulation, which means giving in, pick neither.
The sparks are flying in my mind.
Luckily, your hair's not all standing up on end, right?
Oh, okay, well, let's explore this. The new Netflix series with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, they have a gay, let's say, story angle. Would you share that with us?
I binge watched that show. That show is so wonderful. If you haven't watched it, it's fabulous, fabulous, just so adorable. And the story is that there are two couples who've been best friends for 20 years, and the two husbands, Martin Sheen and Sam Waterston, fall in love. And so it's for a while. And that they tell you that in the, in the commercial and the ads. It's like in the first 10 seconds you know what's gone on. So I'm not a spoiler here. But it's really, really well done. Really well done. And of course it's interesting because Lily Tomlin, as a comedian, it's her own partner, who's a woman, Jane, who writes all of her material. So I'm sure this is a storyline that's very, very close to her heart. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, heartwarming, and really well-written series that explores a lot of what happens when people in a traditional upscale environment, these two men are attorneys, decide to make a different choice and what happens. And it is, kind of messy, to say the least.
Oh my, a real eye-opener, I'm sure.
It can be, yes, sure.
I'm going to have to check that out. I'll put it on my list. I know that several months ago, after his election, Pope Francis made his now famous remark. Would you share what that's about for us?
Yes, he's not my favorite person this week. So he said originally, which was so fantastic, he said originally that he could not judge gay people who have goodwill and who are seeking God. So we all got thrilled, we all got excited, we all waved our flags, right? I know I did, and I'm not a Catholic, but I was very excited. And then in a very short period of time, that all turned around. And then he said on June 4th, so that's just a bit ago, he stressed the importance of children having heterosexual parents. Well, of course, they have heterosexual biological parents, but that wasn't what he said. And what's interesting is that Rome, Italy is a Catholic country, so the citizens of Italy, and particularly Rome, they are increasingly tolerant of all the LGBT people. And so now it will be interesting to see. We know what happened with his stance, the previous Pope's stances on birth control. People just ignored what the Pope had to say, continued to be Catholics, and just did what they wanted to do about birth control. So we'll see what happens here. And it's unfortunate.
Okay, let's think about this. I know that the Pope just addressed a crowd in Vatican City and said something very controversial. And what was that about?
Yeah, he said, this was when he was addressing about 25,000 followers from the Diocese of Rome, he said that the differences between men and women are fundamental and an integral part of being human. Well, we obviously know that. But he likened a long-lasting marriage to a good wine in which a husband and wife make the most of their gender differences. They're not scared of the differences. He says, what great richness the diversity is. And he said, heterosexual marriages not only ensured couples' happiness, but were deemed essential for good parenting. And that's the problem. The voting of it, the judging of it is so painful. And to me, and to Gigi I know as well, there's nothing more important than making sure that every human being accepts and loves himself or herself as they are, as people with character and integrity, making a difference, learning what they need to learn, doing what they can to contribute to the world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's no room for judging, because when we start judging, when we judge ourselves or judge other people, the only outcome is pain. And the pain of young people going through this is too dangerous to continue.
Beautifully put. What is the cause now of the violence against gay men in some Muslim countries?
Yeah, this was quite horrible that, these 3 men were killed because they're gay. And again, this is a very tragic interpretation and then pressure from a religious group, the religious imams. And again, what's more important? Your child who you love or your child's sexual orientation? And this is, so strange, because in history, at the time of, the Greek city-states, they were actually believing that the entire army should be made up of homosexual men. They didn't see anything wrong with it, and it was a very famous quote. And so we may not go that far, but in any case, the idea that people should be killed just because of their race or their religion or now their sexual orientation, I hope that as an American it makes you feel horror, and that you would be really interested in doing things to lessen that opinion.
Violence is not the answer. The worldview now of the light community is undergoing such a, well, we're putting light on it, but the LGBT community is undergoing such a transformation. What are the best indications of a peaceful future?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to worry about in the long term. It seems to me the writing's on the wall. You have now 1.2 million people who attended the Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco last year. And in the 70s, it started out with a couple of hundred. And the thing to remember historically, the 70s in San Francisco, Haight-Ashbury. Do you know how many thousands and thousands of people you had in Haight-Ashbury? Do you know how many people you had in Woodstock in 1969? I mean, hundreds of thousands of people. So the fact that in those days, you didn't get a large group of people in a parade, you had them all going to be-ins and all that, love-ins and be-ins. And so the gay pride movement comes out of that. It comes out of that live and let live, love and let love kind of open-hearted, non-judgmental culture. Very right-brained as well, all about love, all about peace, all about freedom, which Gigi and I, that's our marching song too. But the fact that now you've got 1.2 million people who are celebrating gay pride means that the numbers, the sheer vast numbers of people in this community is going to inform the choices that all of the senators and the congressmen and the governors make, and eventually the president will make. So now we've got 37 states that already allow same-sex marriage, and you know that in the fullness time you're going to have all of the states.
Absolutely, that's inevitable, and hopefully more acceptance, absolutely more acceptance and compassion. Now finally, in your cousin Peggy's case of her coming out, if she had to do that all over again, what would you suggest? How would she go about that?
Well, of course, hindsight is a beautiful thing, so I would certainly say the same thing, because it turned out, as young as I was, that I was a pretty good assessor of the judgmental nature, of part of her family, which was my family too. So I would say that I still don't think there's any benefit in going mano a mano with anybody, head to head, hand to hand with anybody. Why do you want to go into combat if it's not necessary? I think, the ultimate is for you to take a look at your own family. If you're ready to come out, I think you want to look at your family. It's no different, in fact, when I advise women who are divorcing. Well, it's great that you hate your husband and you want to leave him. Now, How are you going to put food on the table for yourself? How are you going to keep a roof over your head? What arrangements have you made? You may have to plan and make arrangements for quite some time before you come out. This is really, really, really crucial. Now, Peggy and Phyllis had, I don't know, there must have been 20 friends or maybe more at their wedding in 1972 or 3. That's a lot. And they also, they had an article about them in the New York Times, which was very interesting. A very, very high profile lesbian couple in New York City, so they got a lot of publicity. But judge for yourself. Take the temperature of your family. Don't make a decision because you're so furious. Don't make a decision because you're sick and tired of pretending. Make a decision that's safe for you and that really will nurture you. And for heaven's sakes, if you're going away to college anyway, that's the irony. Peggy was she was at Harvard, she was in Boston, and her family lived in Scarsdale at the time. So she wasn't going to see her family. She wasn't going to see her family for like 6 months or something. So my opinion is safety and inner peace were more important than self-expression, and they always are. Safety and peace come first. So please think about that. And, I offer a free 1-hour telephone consultation. I'd love to talk to you about this because when you tell your parents, when you tell your family, a lot of it is about how you tell them. And my grandmother was, 92 or something. And when Peggy announced to her parents that she was a lesbian, my mother immediately called my grandmother and said, Mom, did you know? Guess what we just heard? And my grandmother said, well, of course. My mother said, what do you mean, of course? Given that my grandmother was like 91 or 92 years old, and this is in the, the 70s, she figured my, grandmother didn't know anything. My grandmother said, I mean, of course, has she ever brought home a boyfriend? Has she ever had a boyfriend? Have you ever seen her on a date with a boy? Did she go to a prom? Did she go anywhere with a boy? My mother said, no, she didn't. So my grandmother said that, I rest my case. And my grandmother was fine with it. She had no judgments. She was fine. So it's very interesting, I think, that you never know for sure who in your family is going to be perfectly fine with it. So you have to really test the water and you have to really check it out. And one good way to test the water and check it out is make an innocent comment about Caitlyn Jenner and see what you get back from your family. And then you'll know. You'll know how much work you've got to do to get them ready to accept this.
And I appreciate the fact that you can help somebody with some dialogue
Yes.
that really has some blocks, let's say, in expressing their truth.
Yeah, because, I've worked with people from every possible culture, religion, and sexual preference. And so the problems you have are very similar to anyone who's making different choices from their family. And if you love your family, you want to stay connected to your family, then you've got to have the script, and we practice it so that you can little by little motivate them so that they're fine with it.
And won't that be fabulous? Perfect, Susan. Now, I just like to say that no one really needs to suffer anymore because of sexual orientation in 37 states now. So if you are indeed watching the show, please know that here in California and many more states, there is the acceptance, appreciation, and love.